All right, folks, let's get back underway. We are officially jumping into Unit 8. So these are the agency contracts. We're actually now going to get into the agency agreements. We talked about the agency types, different types of agency. The worker real estate agent brochure that goes over the consumer, goes over with the consumer their types of agency options. Now we actually are hopeful that if we've had the worker real estate brochure conversation at first substantial contact and they like you, maybe they want you to be their agent.
It's gonna happen.
It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. But what do we have to have in order to be their agent? A contract. What kind of contract? An agency agreement. And we're gonna talk about the different types. So this is, as a real estate broker, essentially your employment contract. If you do not have an agency agreement, you don't have a client. You're unemployed, right? You're self-employed, also unemployed. So you have this great independent contractor agreement that says you get paid $0 unless you sell something. You have to have somebody to sell it to. So these three are going to be your primary employment contract. There's one more we talked about before the break, and I said don't confuse it with the buyer. Which one was that? Tenant. So you could, in fact, have a tenant agreement. Here in North Carolina, we do not see a lot of practice of tenancy agreement, at least in our local marketplace, largely because it's just never been a great source of income.
Well, it's not a really high rental area either, right? I mean, relative to the purchases. I mean, New York and other places, there's, ton of tenancy agreements.
Yeah, and when areas where it's cost prohibitive to purchase,
yeah, there you go.
You're not a buyer's agent, you're a tenant agent. You're helping people find property to rent and get paid for that. Here we have probably more homes for sale than we do for rent, but the main reason in our local marketplace is no money in it. If you look at MLS, oftentimes it's very little being offered. If you bring a tenant, you might get, hey, here's $50, hey. So there's just not a lot of compensation. So there's not, again, supply and demand, not a lot of demand for it. I've always said that there is a place for tenant representation in our marketplace. If you can get a tenant to agree to pay you a $1,000 commission to help them find a rental, you might be able to do that or whatever you want to charge them.
It's a good business in Miami because no one can afford housing.
Yeah, in the bigger cities it really is. And I'd probably say that maybe even somewhere like Charlotte or Raleigh you might see this more. Here in Winston we're just more sales based, so you'll see that more. That's why I limited it mostly to these three, but know that the tenant agency agreement does exist as well. So let's talk about the listings, and that's where we're going to spend a little bit of time. So one thing about listings, as we've kind of alluded to along the process, if you are going to be a listing agent, most of you will probably not do this as your first transaction. Listing a house is a lot of work, a lot of time, and a lot of liability. So we have to be very diligent. We have to cross all of our T's, dot all of our I's to make sure that we do all the paperwork correctly. Remember from our conversation in last class, what do we have to do, or what do we have to have in our hands before we can even say we have a listing coming, or tweet about it, or anything else? Signed listing agreement. The reason these rules exist is because they are so specific of what we can and cannot do. So let's look into the listing side of things. So agency contracts are required, again, which agency agreements are required to be in writing?
All of them,
All
eventually.
of them, eventually. The buyer agency agreement, the tenant agency agreement, they do have the ability to be oral for a short period of time, but ultimately they all have to be in writing. And when we get them in writing, there are requirements for them, or requirements of those agreements, one of which they have to have a start and end date. You don't hire someone to be your real estate agent forever. We hope that they will come back to you every time they need something, but we don't get to put a buyer agency agreement with a 30-year term. Okay? So we need a start and end date. You must contain, all of your forms will contain the ones that are given to the realtors through the Realtor Association or used through an attorney that has same access, are pre-printed with bold, capital, non-discriminatory language. And you'll see these if you look in your sample forms. I've got all those on the website. There's also some in the back of your book. But you can find the section and everyone will have bold capital letters, non-discriminatory language. Disclosure of your license number. This is a number you will commit to memory. You will need to commit it to memory because you will need your real estate license number for many, many things. Checking in at classes when you have one, like for your CE. You will need to put it on every contract that you fill out. Every agency agreement and every contract has a place for you in your license number. So you're going to want to make sure you put that in your brain. Another thing is the agency agreements disclosure are in appendix. So you can see these in your appendix A through, on page 624 through 625. This is the rules that actually govern as the statute that goes over why our agency agreements must be in writing. Okay. An agreement between the firm and the client is always the case with these agreements. Remember, unless you are the firm, the agreement is with the firm. And when I say that, it means if you are a sole proprietor, you are the agent and the firm, right? You're both. You're the only agent at the firm, and you are the firm. Otherwise, all agreements are with the firm and the client. So let me ask you a kind of a secondary question. If the agency agreement is between the firm and the client, who is on the offer to purchase? Who's that contract between?
The offer to purchase is
The
between the
buyer.
Buyer and the seller.
Yeah.
So the reason I bring that is because nowhere on the offer to purchase are we talking about the things that we're about to talk about. So the reason I bring this up is because in the transaction, buyer does something wrong, seller does something wrong, agent does something wrong, and they're like, per the offer to purchase, no. These agency agreements are between agents and our consumer.
This is an agent to represent, not about a specific property.
Exactly. This is to hire you to buy a property. The contract is, by definition, for a specific property, because we got that specific performance. We got to be real specific. Buyer, seller, that property. We're not on that. This is where we are. This is our agreement. That contract is their agreement. These are our agreements. Do you see the difference? So the listing agreement is with the firm. The brokerage is primarily responsible. The agent that signs it is typically the one primarily doing the conversation. An express. What's an express agency agreement? Say again?
Agreement.
It's an agreement, right? It's a mutual agreement.
That's what.
So we do not, in North Carolina, as we talked about, recognize implied agency. So unless we have an express agreement, we don't have one, and not only that, it will need to be reduced to writing. So the listing agreement also has to be in writing from inception. What does it mean to be from inception? From the start. Yep, from day one. So the day inception. All right, so listing agreement is required by the commission, of course, details your commission and what you will get paid, and is a contract in which details your duties to your client. Now, most importantly is probably the second one on the screen for everybody in the room. Right? What are we getting paid? And does it say how much you're getting paid?
No, the firm.
How much the firm is getting paid. Thank you. So all the money's coming to the firm, and our agency agreement will be inclusive of that information. Important note to follow, this agency agreement, the listing agreement, who pays the commission, by the way, typically?
Seller.
Seller. So in our listing agreement, it's how much of the total commission is going to be collected. Our listing agreement then further dictates who gets what portion of that, from the sense that if a buyer agent from another firm brings their buyer, how much are we offering as a co-broke? Or if it stays at our firm and someone sells it at our firm and you allow dual agency, what do those splits look like? So we always have to say exactly what is being paid on our agency agreements. So for example, if we have an agency agreement and it says we're going to get paid 10% commission, you're going to pay 10% commission, 5 to me as your listing agent, and we're going to offer 5 to the buyer's agent. Well, let's say I needed to cut my commission or something came up and I'm going to take 4%. We're still going to offer 5% to the buyer's agent. How much is that total? 9%. Thank you, Math Liz. 9%. I need to go back and amend my listing agreement to reflect I'm not getting 10%, we're doing 9%. It always has to be exactly what is being paid. So we always want to keep that current. It is the contract in which details your duties to the seller. It also has some duties from the seller for you. And we're actually going to go over these. One of the things that I have developed for you guys, and I don't think I've put this on your website yet because I just recently launched it, but it's mostly designed for the post-licensing course, which is one of your courses called Contracts and Closing. And the offer to purchase and contract has a lot of questions. So in that class, we spend almost 12 hours going over the offer to purchase and contract, the 13 approved addenda, and all the little paragraphs and provisions. So we spend a lot of time in that class going through the contract. So in order to facilitate, I think it was like a 13-part series of YouTube, and it's a little playlist, and I'll share it. I think it's actually public, so if you go to my site on a channel, you can see it. If you're watching the recorded pre-license classes, that same channel has these on there. It's called Coffee and Contract, and I'll share the link on the page. But I did it largely for the contract class. There's actually a quiz that goes along with it, so I can give you that if you want it to make sure you watch it. But it goes through all the contract provisions. While it's not as heavily tested in this course from the specifics of the contract as it is in contracts, it is very much conceptually tested in this class. And I think it's a good opportunity for you guys to expose yourself to that. I don't think you can get too much exposure to writing contracts, because the goal is you'll have a lot of contracts. That's why we're investing money to get smarter. We need to write contracts to get paid for those. So those contracts is a really good opportunity for you to review. So let's talk about, where do we find these folks? We need people to sign agency agreements. We need people who will write contracts. So how and where do we find them? So first and foremost, most of you have family and friends that are sharing in your agony right now, right? Then you're like, oh, let's go on vacation. You're like, I can't. I have real estate class. Hey, let's go drinking. I can't. I want to stay up and study for my real estate class. I know that's the answer you would give. So they know you're in real estate right now. Those folks will likely be your first sources of business. They will be your family and friends that know you are now in real estate. Beyond that, though, how do we start getting other folks that may not be sharing in the pains with you at the moment to work with you? And so there are, as with any business, some rules around how you can, in fact, contact the public, solicit business, and generate those folks. I will tell you, and it was told to me when I came into real estate, and I will share the wisdom with you, I thought I was getting in the real estate business. Turns out, guys, you're getting into a lead generation business, meaning you're generating leads who want to hopefully buy or sell real estate. Because without leads, you just get to come to education and hang out with me and come to the socials, because you don't have anything to sell. So lead generation is a big part of what you're getting yourself into. And because of that, in order to be successful, we want to make sure you're also being legal. You don't want some of the fines associated with this guy, the do not call registry. Anybody ever heard of that?
Well, it works about 38% of the time.
You know, it's supposed to work more. It's supposed to work more. And it is starting to work more, because people are starting to realize we can get fined big time for not following the do not call list, which is also why it's in this class and every class that I will teach you. There's a real estate broker friend of mine I know who was using a dialer. It was a software system that would automatically dial people in succession so he could call people faster. And supposedly this software was screening the do not calls. It was not. He ended up with at least 4 complaints, all with $11,000 fines. He's looking at over $40,000 in fines from the do not call list. Yes, sir.
If the software told him it was covering it, though, that's the software's responsibility to pay, isn't it? Or does he get stuff?
That'd be like the equivalent of me saying, go measure my house, and you measured it wrong. Like, it wasn't me, it was him. Is that your sign in the yard?
It was a tape measure.
Oh yeah, it was a tape measure. Yeah, unfortunately, when you hire service providers in our industry, whether it be for do not call calling or lead generation or measuring or photography, anything that they do for you is the same as you doing it. You're still responsible for it. And that's why I always teach in my classes, always inspect what you expect. So if you've got these people putting websites out there to generate leads, are they blind or are they identifying your brokerage? And whether they are or not is your responsibility to check it and see if the persons you're hiring to do the job would do it as if you would, meaning hopefully in compliance.
I mean, you'll be held accountable, but you can still go after them privately if you choose to, but good luck.
Yeah, let's hope maybe that the service provider's agreement doesn't have a subrogation clause, right? Or an indemnity clause, moreover. So the fine is up to $11,000, and that's just a federal fine, by the way. 500 calls through the state additional, so 11.5 total. Cold calling, as we refer to it, is not first of all, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It might be, especially if you're getting the cold calls. But it's not illegal. It just means you have to follow the rules to do it. Before the do not call list, I could pull out the phone book and just go through and call. You want to buy, sell? You want to buy, sell? You want to buy, sell? If you've actually, some of the most successful sales folks, between 9 and 9. Some of the most successful sales folks, whether it be in real estate or you may have seen Pursuit of Happiness, the Chris Gardner story. It was a stockbroker, same thing, just selling stocks instead of houses. They would just cold call and just call and call and call, and they would make hundreds of calls every day. And the number of calls they made, they would be able to equivocate their business. It's a numbers business.
Metrics.
Yeah, it's metrics. So the do not call list changed that a little bit because the number of people you can call changed, and some of the things and what you can discuss with them on that conversation also changed. So a couple exceptions to the do not call list are you can call and invite people to things, right? Who doesn't want an invitation? Come to my birthday party, it'd be fun. What's something we might call and invite people to if we're real estate brokers?
Open house.
Open house. How cool is that? I'm holding an open house in your neighborhood. I would love for you to come out and have cookies and cake with me. Who better choose your next neighbor than you? Come on out. Right? That's an invitation. I'm not soliciting, I'm not asking for their business. See the difference? Invitation, A-OK. Prior business relationship within 18 months. So we've worked together in the past. My goal is if I sold you a house, I want you to remember me. So I may try to call you and say, hey, remember me. You liked me. If you know anyone else looking to buy, sell, or invest in real estate, I hope they'll like me too. Can you give them my name or give me their name and number? And so those folks will become a source of your business until they tell you to stop calling them. I'll talk about that in a minute. Personal relationships. So if your mother cannot put you on the do not call list, sorry, you can't. We got a personal relationship, so you've got some leniency here, saying that hey, we have an actual connection. We are allowed to do that, which is why, in fact, your mother is also allowed to call you hundreds of times in a day.
Is that like the 7 degrees of separation rule? Like how deep does that go?
I don't know. I would love to know how deep that goes. My father was at he was at my house this week. I must have talked to him at least 15 times. He was down in Oak Island at my house, and I might talk to him once a week. But I was like, nope, this weekend, 15 times. So you can do that. One thing I will caution you though with the do not call list too is you have to also keep a list of, so we call some of these people and they're like, hey, thanks for calling, don't call me again. You have to keep that list in addition to the do not call list. And that should be for your whole office, and it should be updated no less than every 30 days. So we have a constant running list of who's actually on the list and who's asked us not to call them back. So we are not harassing people. Now, if you really want to freak out a telemarketer, next time you get the call, I'm on the DNC list. Can I get your name and number? That's an $11,500 fine where I'm at. I just need to talk to your supervisor. I'm sorry.
Click.
Yeah, that really
the
does.
dialer did it.
That really does freak them out.
It's more fun to make you think you're actually going to buy something from them.
Oh, that's true.
Then
too.
tell
I
them.
love it when like you get the healthcare ones.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, pretty great.
I used to get the
I'll buy them for a half an hour and just
just
I'm not
dang.
going to buy shit. You
Yeah.
done? They never call you back.
Yeah, good call, because they're like, those ways they probably put a note in the system, don't call that guy. I used to like the Google, hey, this is Google calling, because we can place your, I'm like, first of all, Google doesn't call. Second of all, you are a approved vendor for Google, and you're just charging me money to run an pay-per-click ad campaign, which I'm successful to do. So I had a 30-minute tech conversation with a salesperson whom I knew more about it than they did, because they were just selling it. They weren't the actual guys creating the ad. I'm like, so tell me about your meditator. Tell me about meditation. Tell me about the price. Yeah, like they're like, oh, yeah, wow. So at some point, you finally hung up with me. So I'm like, tell me again why I would pay you to do this. So sometimes you can. But hey, they called you, right? They want to engage in conversation. I will tell you, as you become salespeople, you do develop a healthy respect for salespeople. All right, so let's talk about this other stuff called fax machine. If anybody's never seen one, they look a little bit like this. You actually put paper in the top, and it scans it and pushes it back out the bottom. And then there's another one of these somewhere in the world, and it's connected to a landline. It's an old telephone line, and it will print out whatever was scanned there. And you have specific rules about how that works. Because if you are scanning and faxing things to someone, you are using their ink and their paper. So we don't want to spam fax them. So we have these do not fax and do not spam lists as well. The opt-out is one of the most important things, both with your email and the faxes that says, hey, got your message, don't need any more. And so there needs to be a clear procedure, whether it be through a reply or go to a website and unsubscribe, whatever that is, so that you can kick your email and kick your phone number out of those services so you're not continuing to get those.
Is there a length of time, is there a time restriction on how long a voicemail somebody can leave?
Depends on if they pocket dialed you or not.
Well, no, I mean, some of those, you know, when it becomes time to vote for everybody,
Oh,
some
yeah.
of those things are so long. you
Yeah,
just wanna
and
go stop.
like with the votes and even with pocket dials, as brokers you have to be very careful. My voicemail will get full, and sometimes it is I have a 3-minute message. My voicemail only holds so many minutes worth of messages, so you do have to watch those. There's no rule on how long they can read it, but if you don't want their messages, you can put them on the do not call. I don't want it. Now, robo-dialers are a big button right now. They're really hot, where there's, especially with AI and artificial intelligence, where the robots are calling and you think you're talking to a person, but you're not. You're actually talking to like an Alexa type of conversation. They're getting really good at it. And because of that, they're also using them for spamming and phishing and lots of scams.
Scams,
Frauds.
yeah.
So there's a lot of things going on with that. So in the world we live in, just be diligent. Best thing you can do is pick up the phone call, but of course even now they're able to mimic those a little bit. So we'll talk more about some of the issues that come up from a liabilities perspective, including wire fraud and some of those. This one has no restrictions.
Snail
Snail
mail.
mail.
Snail mail. For anyone who still reads snail mail or gets snail mail, you have no restrictions. And this is why we still get mail. Because it's the only thing marketers can do with no restrictions. And if you're like me, this is the only mail you get is junk mail and solicitations. Because no one, when was the last time someone hand wrote a letter and sent you a handwritten letter?
A broken heart.
It was a broker.
A what?
A broken heart.
Ooh, broken heart. Yeah, that's harsh. Say again?
I said it was broker, but it looked like it was handwritten.
Yeah, and they were getting really good at that too, like making it look like it's handwritten. There's actually a software program I've used where you can write your handwriting and they will print it. Like, so you make your own font out of your own handwriting.
Wow.
So there's lots of things out there that do that. I will tell you, this is probably one of the most underutilized tools in your arsenal as a real estate broker, because when was the last time you got a handwritten note? I can't tell you how many notes I keep. I actually keep a lot of my handwritten notes on a bulletin board in my office because I get them very rarely. That were, hey, enjoyed your class, or hey, it was great meeting you, or thanks for your service, you were awesome. So whatever the case may be, those personal notes say the same thing as an email. They say the same thing as the postcard. But they just mean something when somebody took a pen, took a paper, wrote out their thoughts, licked a stamp, and put it in the mail. Someone took the time to do that for you. Imagine if you did that for your business.
Someone said more than 50% of this is timing because you are getting in front of people at the right time,
At the
whether
right
they know
time.
them or not.
Yeah, and a big part of lead generation is, I'm not calling and looking, again, I'm not gonna call you and say, hey, you're gonna buy a house today, you're gonna buy a house today, you're gonna buy a house today. My goal is to build relationships, and it's usually a multi-month or year trend that I'm trying to get to. Most of my internet leads are 6 to 8 months out by. So I'm gonna hit you up the moment you hit my website, knowing you're not gonna buy from me for 6 to 8 months. I just have to be there when you're ready. Yes, sir.
Who sponsors all the, like if you're provision of both, who sponsors like the marketing? Like, do we actually sponsor the firm sponsor that?
That's a great question. Who says who pays for all this daggone marketing? Well, that's dependent. It depends on your firm. Some firms are more the broker approach, where they will do the marketing for you and they will use their brand. And others want you to brand yourself to your people, so you mail out to whomever you want, your friends, your family. So more your brand, and so a lot of that depends on your split. Some people will give you more of your commission to do your own marketing. Some people will do less commission and they'll do the marketing. It just varies. And some people you can get shared postcards with a lender, and there's a lot of things that you can do to help offset those costs within the confines of RESPA, which we'll talk about later. Yes, ma'am.
What about going door to door and like leaving your card, or if you wanted
Ooh,
to?
that's a great question. I don't think I have that.
Solicitation.
Yes, we'll talk about it. So the door knocking is a well, it used to not be that popular. It used to be like really popular, and then
Yeah.
it's like nobody's wanting to do it. And now, because of some of the limitations on the marketing that's going on, there's not a lot of rules on door knocking, and so you may very well see that. Now, if someone has a no trespassing, a no solicitation, you should not door knock. And also watch for purple paint, because that means no trespassing as well. Yeah.
I think you have to consider volume before you guys start considering a marketing approach, right? So one of the big things that we did with Chrysler is they keep a huge number of statistics on everything, right? You're gonna, out of the leads that you actually get, you're gonna close 20% of them on average. If you're really good, you'll put down 30-35%. And we're talking guys who would sell 40 units a month. The average salesperson sells like 8 to 10. So you're talking your top performers are gonna put down like 30-35%. So if you go knocking 100 doors, 20 of those people are gonna become a lead, and you're gonna close 20% of those 20 people.
Yeah.
So if you knock on 400 doors in a day, you've made one sale, maybe two if you're lucky. So when you start considering your marketing approach, you need to consider what the actual turnover is on that, and it's just not an efficient way to do it. I mean, you might get lucky, and like, especially if you're from the neighborhood, your
Yeah.
statistics will be a lot different than if you know. So if you go knocking all your neighbors' doors, you're a lot more likely to get that. But again, consider the average time that someone's going to buy a house too. The average time is what, 7.5 years right now?
I use a 7 to 9, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, you're looking at a huge amount of time between when somebody purchased their house and when they buy their next house. I mean, it's not an efficient way.
Yeah.
And I won't disagree with that. The only caveat I'll add to that is door knocking is time. If you have no money and you have time, do that.
Yeah.
If you have money,
Okay, that's-
there's more efficient ways that can, but what you end up doing is when you're spending money, you need to track what is the return. If I spend $100, how much do I get back? Door knocking usually doesn't cost anything, so a lot of people do open houses and door knocking because they're less effective, but absolutely there's ways. And I can tell you and Zillow, Realtor.com will be calling you out the yin yang because they want to sell you stuff, and they will take your money so that you can buy leads, but you have to measure the return on investment. And I can tell you specifically, it's usually 1 to 2 out of 100, which equates to basically what you broke down. And so I can close 1 to 2 out of 100, but it is a 4 to 6 month timeline from the time I get it. So it's just a time on task over time and being there when the timing is right. And that's where most brokers go wrong. You door knock or you register and they're not like, I don't want to buy a house. You're like, I gotta quit. You don't want to buy a house right now. You just need to be there in 8 months when they're ready, 8 to 10 months when they are ready. And it's that consistency of staying in front of them. That's why you see realtors marketing. That's why you see them on their park benches and menus.
Painting on the side of their car.
Yeah, paint on the side. You don't ever be like, oh, I saw you on the menu. Can you help me buy a house? There's just branding. They just want to be in front of you when they think, so that when you think housing, you're thinking about them. It's not, and that's where you got to be careful because you will spend a lot of money marketing and not get a return versus prospecting, which costs us less money and usually a higher return. And it's just a time-money conversation. Yeah.
Who sets the guidelines for your marketing? Let's say, because I'm a graphic designer, I usually design stuff for my friends.
Yeah.
Would I be able to design my own business card?
It depends on your firm, but typically some firms you do not have a lot of leniency. Like, this is our brand, we're going to give you
Don't
everything
mess
you need.
with it.
Yeah, don't mess with it, don't tweak it. This is our RPG code, don't mess with it. And it depends on whether it's franchise or local firm too. Most franchises have guidelines to be in compliant with franchise marketing, the fonts, the colors, all those things. Smaller firms, local firms, as a mom and pop shop type thing, they're probably going to have a little more leniency. So it really does depend. And so you're all independent contractors, right? Many of you may develop your own brand regardless of what firm or franchise you work for. You are your product. That's what you're selling is you. So that's solicitation there. Let's talk about Sherman. I've mentioned Sherman before. When did I mention Sherman in this room?
Many times.
What were we talking about?
Can't be in cahoots with each other to drive up the
Money.
price.
That commission, right? Price fixing. One of the biggest things that I see brokers doing, and this is actually more often now with the onset of social media, because you guys have a thought run through your brain and you throw it out for the world to read. We're going to put a little more screening on that going forward, because if you're not careful, you can be found guilty of the Federal Sherman Antitrust Act, which means no price fixing, no boycotting. If anybody in the room starts having discussions about commissions, you leave the room. Because price fixing is illegal. And so if you're like, hey, I'm going to charge 10%, you charge 10% too, and then no matter who gets it, and you charge 10%, all our firms in town, we're going to get together and charge 10%. And you may do that, and you will all end up in the same prison cell. Because you're price fixing.
And yet everybody's at 6%.
Not necessarily. And that's actually where we're going to go today, because there is no such thing as a standard commission. Every firm, now what does happen is firms, the firm you join, may have a policy on what you can or cannot charge. So if you're joining a firm, firms operate on a business model like most should. So they say, if we're going to do this much in volume or sales, we need this much commission, so that firm says what you can charge. Now that's a firm policy within where you work, per your independent contractor agreement. What cannot happen is your firm, your firm, your firm, your firm, all of us get together and say what we're doing, or share commissions, or share commission structures, because now we're basically organized crime. And so we can't do that. So other thing in conjunction with that is boycotting. And this is the one where I see most violations. Don't use that, home inspector, they suck. Don't use those termite people. You're putting it out there on Facebook, you're putting it in your office, and you're putting it out in writing. Not safe, guys. You gotta be real careful. Because just because someone doesn't provide a great level of service doesn't mean you should keep your mouth shut. But when you tell everybody not to use them in the professional environment, you're essentially creating a boycott. And that is also illegal. So you gotta be careful with that. Yes, sir?
But you can't list a bad experience, you have a bad experience with somebody.
Yeah, I mean, you could give them a bad review. There's nothing wrong with that. That's actually the world we live in now, is peer reviews. Now, there's a difference between reviews and convoluted. Our office will not use this home inspector. We are just not going to allow it. I mean, the consumers, last I checked, in our world, our clients get to choose whoever they want to use. We as brokers don't get to tell them, right? That's how the boycotting conversation comes about. So let's talk about earning some money. Who likes money? I like money. Let's get some. Well, we got to earn it. So how do we earn our commission? Well, first, you got to have a real estate license. You're working on that. We're going to get you one. Because in order to receive commission income in real estate, you have to have a license. No person or entity in North Carolina can receive commission income without a license. The end. Now, we got to get you something in writing. What do we got to get in writing?
Agreement, agency.
Agency agreement. Got to have an agency agreement in writing. Why does it got to be in writing? To be enforceable, right? Because even though all agency agreements have to be in writing at some point, we got the weird oral buyer agency or tenancy agreement, which is great, just not enforceable. So let's get it in writing. And then we got to do what we were hired to do. We either have to sell the house, we have to help them buy the house, we have to help them rent the house, whatever our charge was under that agency agreement, we have to earn it, or perform it. So, again, not set by law, not set by the Real Estate Commission, MLS, or Realtor Association. But by the way, don't confuse these, because people do. Commission is what we get paid. The Real Estate Commission, totally different. They didn't think that through very well. The Real Estate Commission actually has nothing to do with what you get paid. They don't care. If you call and complain, be like, I didn't get paid, they're going to say, sorry, we don't care. Because all the Real Estate Commission is doing is protecting the consumer from you. They really don't care if you get shorted. They're not your advocate. They're there for the consumer. In fact, they are your disciplinary board. Yeah, they're your parents. They're going to slap you on the wrist or put you in real estate jail, right? So y'all know there is no such thing as real estate jail, right? It is either real jail or not. I have to say that because I have to say that. MLS, why is MLS in this conversation?
You have to have a place to list your property.
So one thing that MLS and Realtor Associations, the reason this gets in here is because in the MLS, so if I go to list your house for sale, and you agree that the seller's paying all the commission, right? And she has a buyer who's looking for houses for sale. You have the listing agreement that says how much commission is being paid. How does she know how much she's going to get paid for selling that listing?
The buyer agency agreement.
Buyer agency agreement is going to dictate what she's expected to get paid, and the MLS is going to have the offering from the listing firm as to what they are willing to pay or offer someone for bringing a buyer's agent.
If it's less, you got to get it from your client.
Correct. And if it's not what matches the buyer agency agreement, then we have a different story. But ultimately, the MLS is our agreements between firms that says, hey, I'm listing this house, I'm willing to pay a buyer's agent X number of dollars to bring a buyer. or what that agency relationship looks like. So if it's not in MLS, I don't have that information. So the very first thing that I should do if I'm going to sell a property not in MLS is what?
Put it in MLS.
What? Ask how much am I getting paid? We'll put it in MLS. And because MLS is a brokerage to brokerage agreement that says if someone from one firm sells a property at another firm, this is how much money we will give you. That's how we know what we're getting paid before we sell that property. Do you have a question? No, go ahead.
Is that negotiable or is that locked in stone?
It's all great question. He says that negotiable. All commission is negotiable. You can get more if you do more. You could do less if you do less. And there are models built on both of those, and we'll talk about them. So, commission's 100% negotiable within the confines of your firm. Your firm may have policies on what you can and cannot do. So your firm is going to be your, kind of your first point of contact for that. All commission is negotiable. The Realtor Association, again, is your trade. This is your trade organization. Think of this as an avenue for education, networking and education. They don't really set a lot of rules. The Realtor Association, typically owns the MLS, and most people want to become a realtor so they can get in MLS and get those realtor forms that we've been talking about and reviewing. But that's what the realtor does for you. It's your trade organization to give you these member benefits. They have nothing to do with your money.
Other than that you pay them to be part of it.
Yeah, you pay dues to be a part of it, just like an HOA.
But once you have your license, anybody can be a realtor as long as you pay your dues, right? Or do they have additional rules?
Nope, anybody can be a realtor so long as you are paying the dues and have a license. They may have, some rules that if you've violated some of the rules, they may not let you in. But most anybody with a license who pays the dues can be in the association.
So is that for a realtor, if you wanted like a billboard or something on the side of the highway, you would have to be a realtor, right? You couldn't just
Well,
be like a broker.
If you want to use their logo, you do.
That's what I was gonna say, that's the difference. I could be a licensee. By the way, North Carolina.
Wait a minute, what did he say?
To use their logo.
Yeah, I was gonna say, her question was, if I wanna put a billboard on the side, do I have to be a realtor to do it? His question was, his comment was, if you wanna use the realtor logo. And the reason that is the case is because there are 100,000 people in North Carolina that have a license, have one. There are only 46,000 realtors, meaning they paid the dues.
Wow.
They can use the realtor logo. They have access to the forms that we're talking about. They are in the MLS to see the homes for sale. So there's a lot of people who have a license. There's probably about 25% of the people who have a license use it on a daily basis to pay their bills.
It's like a credibility stamp too, if you are, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it can be seen as a credibility.
Yeah, the Realtor art and the Realtor brand, because you'll see the ads by Realtor and NAR and all those things. So it does lend some credibility to you that you have additional standards. The biggest difference that when you become a Realtor, you subscribe to a code of ethics. So Realtors are expected to be more ethical and can actually be charged for ethical violations in addition to commission violations that are in addition to civil violations. So just a little higher expectation for Realtor members. And most of you, if you really want to be a daily practitioner, being a Realtor member is almost a necessity because it just makes getting everything you need so much easier. Doesn't mean that you have to, again, you can do it. It's just the Realtor Association facilitates your processes.
How much are the dues?
It varies. I want to say mine locally for local, state, and national run somewhere in the 500s for the year. I can't remember. Now that's to be a realtor, just to be a realtor, right? You also have MLS dues to have access to MLS, which these are usually billed on a monthly or quarterly basis.
Why only a quarter of the licensed folks are part of Realtor?
A lot of folks have license for referral purposes. A lot of people had a license. We were one of the hardest states to get a license, but easiest to keep it.
So they may just not be using it.
They pay their $45 every year just in case.
I got you.
Yeah, and a lot of people are paying that $45 and just don't use it. So that's commissions. Commission sharing is a firm policy. All the commission goes to the firm, and the firm gets to decide how they share amongst their brokers in-house. So all the money goes to the firm. How the firm disperses it amongst its brokers, that's per your independent contractor agreement. That's up to your kind of an in-house situation. MLS, again, is our offer of compensation between firms. What my firm would offer someone from your firm if you sold our listing or vice versa. Now referrals can go inside or outside of the state. Referral fees, again, you've heard me call them my mailbox money. I love mailbox money because I can give you a name and a number of someone looking to buy or sell real estate. You do everything else. And when they buy or sell real estate, you send me a check. It's fantastic. And I say me, you send my firm a check because it still goes to the firm. But I can also send them out of state, which many of you, and sometimes people come here and they're like, hey, I don't know anybody in Winston. Great, where'd you come from? Because you can get referral fees from anybody buying or selling in your whole family tree, friend, atmosphere, wherever they are in the United States. So you can get referral fees anywhere you want to go. So that's commission. Earning commissions on the listing side. So when you take a listing, do you get paid the day you walk in the door? Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? You have a listing agreement. That listing agreement says what you can do, what your expectations are, and if you are able to perform on the outline duties in the listing agreement, then you will have earned a commission. Now, we're going to talk about this, but is the day we earn our real estate commission the same day we receive our real estate commission? And not usually. Because we earn our commission when we find a ready, willing, and able buyer and put them together with a ready, willing, and able seller. Right? We accomplished what you hired me to do. That's the day we earned it. When do we get paid? Yeah, usually on the
Plus a day
closing.
or two, usually.
The day it records. When we record, we can disperse funds. That's the Good Fund Settlement Act. That's the day we can record. So when we record, that's when we get actually paid for
Well, your
our
firm
work.
gets paid, but then you could be a delay, right?
Also true. Our firm receives the income. It might be a day or two after before you get yours. So you have to have a license in good standing on current in your funds, pay the $45, and your education, your 8 hours of CE and any post requirements. You're going to have a valid listing contract. This is the listing agreement. We're going to spend some time on that. And then procure a ready, willing, and able buyer. So as a listing agent, my job is to find a ready, willing, and able buyer. Does that mean I have to represent the buyer? No. Likely I won't. I put it in MLS and some of you found it and you had a buyer. I put it in my marketing resulted in you bringing a ready, willing, and able buyer. Either way, I was able to procure that. That make sense? And then we have to add the offer and acceptance. We'll get in more on that side when we get to contracts. So your commission may have been earned. When I say earned, meaning not yet received, but earned, if the seller commits fraud, meaning you procured a ready, willing, and able buyer under false pretense. The seller couldn't sell, didn't have the ability to sell, lied, changes their mind, and refuses to sell. Hey, come sell my house. Oh, thanks for getting it under contract. Never mind. When that happens, believe me, it happens. So if they change their mind and refuse to sell, and you remember, I don't know if you recall this story where I had the little old lady under contract, right? And under contract, they're like, we have nowhere to go. And they couldn't find anywhere to go, so they had to terminate.
Still there.
Still there. I had earned my commission. The buyer agent had earned their commission. We did not get paid. Has a title with uncorrected defects. So one of the parts of the offer to purchase and contract that we'll look at says that the seller will provide clear title. Meaning I have to have a title to transfer ownership. If we don't have clear title, I can't transfer ownership. So if there's title issues, we can't do that. Insists on terms not in the listing. So if they want you to do something above and beyond not in your listing agreement, you may have earned your agreement. You may still have earned it even though you didn't do something. Typically this is maybe something to do illegally. Mutual agreement between the buyer and seller to cancel. So if you have them under contract and the buyer and seller mutually agree, you could have still earned your commission even though they're not buying. You could have earned your commission when they refused to accept an offer based on a protected class, which I also had happen. Did I tell you that one too?
No.
That one doesn't sound familiar.
So I had it's a double wide out in the sticks on 10 acres. And I had it for sale for a while. And really nice seller, I thought. Just a good old boy. We tried it.
Oh,
Traded
the
knives
buyer
and-
was X.
Yep. And then offer came in, we negotiated it back and forth. He says, great, Stephen, write it up, send it over. He said, cool, buyer agent sends it over. Seller goes to sign the contract, sees the last name of the buyer, says, I'm not selling to them.
You did tell us that.
Yeah. So right there, I had earned my commission. I had procured a ready, willing, and able buyer. He was just refusing to accept an offer from a protected class. So I could have sued him for money. Could have got my paycheck.
Say why? No, what?
He refused to accept an offer from a protected class. He'd actually agreed to terms, but he didn't know who the buyer was until he saw their last name, and he assumed an ethnicity. Thank you. He had assumed that based on their name and said, nope, not selling to those people. Not going to do it. So never talked to him again. But I could have got paid.
So if your buyer backs out,
Yeah, I should have. Just more work.
if your buyer backs out after putting down earnest money, or, you wouldn't get paid for that, right?
Oh, great. Actually, so she has a good question, by the way. I've procured a ready, willing, and able buyer, but during the inspections, the buyer has terminated. So because of that, I likely have not procured a ready, willing, and able because now they're no longer willing
Or able.
or able. Maybe the able could be the loan,
Financing,
right?
yeah.
It says the lender.
It's typically what
Yeah.
They just decided they didn't wanna do it anymore.
Right. Now, if they, yeah, and again, we'll talk about that contract, that due diligence period, where they can terminate for any or no reason at all. However, again, our goal is to be able to say, if buyer, seller were sitting at the table today, could they execute and sign the contract? If so, then that's the point you have earned your commission. They're ready, they're willing, and they can sign right now. That make sense? So that's how you can get it. We're going to talk about these types of agreements when you get back because it starts getting really little fun conversation. So have your next break.